scary stories. Hello. For context, I'm a 28-year-old blonde woman, and I look around 18 to 22, or so I'm told. I recently went back to college for human resources, so I was on the train at 1 p.m. on a Monday to get to a 3 p.m. class. The train comes from outside the city, and it's super dead during the day when it's not rush hour. I got on the train, I walked upstairs, but decided to go to the middle area. There's a middle area next to a bathroom because someone was humming and I thought it was annoying. The washroom door was closed the whole time. I didn't think anyone was in there. I was alone on the middle area with no one around me. I was sitting with my jacket off, drinking a tea out of my bunny mug with my backpack across from me. Completely comfortable because the GO train is typically a calm ride. A man pops out of the bathroom after 5 minutes of me sitting there. He is around 22 years old. He has white fine line scars in the shape of a heart and a 3D cube on his head. He puts his hands on my backpack. I assume he's going to try to mug me. I think I'm going to punch him in the throat and run because this isn't my first attempted mugging. My body froze because his first words were, "I'm going to kill my father tonight, and I'm going to make you help me." He doesn't want my debit card. He wants to hurt me. I currently work in mental health. I am used to working with people with homicidal thoughts. I don't scare easily when someone says their voices say to kill me because I feel like I have all the resources I need and the rapport with my people. I don't know this man. Immediately, I knew this isn't just thoughts or a case of being lonely and talking to random strangers. He's not seeking help from me. I need to leave, but his leg is blocking me in. It sounds like you're going through a lot right now. I'm sorry to hear you are upset with your dad. Tell me more about it. I grab my backpack. I know I look terrified because I just know this isn't good. He says, "No, you are fucking not. Because women like you fucking sleep with my fucking dad, you fucking bitch." He gets closer and corners me into the seat. He says he's going to make me help him kill his dad with a knife tonight because he's tired of pretty women like me always ignoring him but fucking with his dad, asking me why I do stuff like that. I feel terrified, and I realize that we are 2 feet away from a washroom, and I am scared he's going to try and make me go in there, and my body is just frozen. His face gets closer to mine. I scream at the top of my lungs, "Help me! Help me! Help!" And honestly, I didn't even recognize my voice. I sounded terrified. 4 random train people came running in. 1 man, 2 young women, and 1 middle-aged woman. One of the men asked me if I'm okay. The guy across from me puts his legs down and is screaming, "Oh, help me, I'm a vain woman. We're all vain and cruel, and I want someone pretty, not like him," as he motions to his scars. I bolt upstairs. I couldn't even talk for a minute. My hands were shaking. I have been in some scary situations before, but I was comfortable with my commute, not on guard like I am at work. One of the other men who came to help me sees that he is mad and still yelling. I honestly don't remember what. He tells me to run towards the customer service train and he'll make sure that he doesn't follow me. We press the yellow security strip before I get up and go, and the train starts beeping, but there was no security to come. The guy who came to help me found me later when the train stopped and told me that he had strolled off the train like nothing had even happened. However, two young girls who came to me had their phones and took a lot of pictures of him walking away and gave them to the police. I walked to the customer service train. The police came, but the man was gone. They talked to me for a few minutes and said that they know who he is because the scars on his face and because he did something similar yesterday, and they think that he might be mentally ill. The police officer didn't seem very interested in talking to me. They asked if I saw his knife. I said no, but it doesn't surprise me because he mentioned a knife, and the way he spoke was the confidence of a man with a weapon. They obviously do not care what I think he could have had. They explained that he slapped another woman on the train, and someone saw he had a knife out at some point. And someone had called the cops before we even pressed the emergency strip, but the customer service train guy didn't even know that. He only knew my story because no one else pressed the security strip and came running to him. I just want to say that someone with mental illness can be homicidal, but it's not a symptom of who they are as a person. It's a sign of how unwell they are at the moment. Not all people with mental illness have homicidal thoughts or are violent at all. I know very kind and wonderful people who have homicidal thoughts when they go through life transitions. These people do not scare me. Maybe this man had mental health issues, but this man scared the hell out of me. So I'm glad that the people came running to me when I called, and the young girls took pictures, because my gut tells me he would have done something if I didn't start screaming. I sincerely hope if he had mental health issues that they took him to a hospital so he's not roaming free. The worst part of this is that I saw a young lady between 18 and 20 years old crying at the train station the next day, and I overheard her saying that she cried and hid in the washroom the entire train ride to the station because a man scared her when she got on the train, and she had to call her parents to pick her up. I have no clue if it was the same guy, but I felt like it was possible, and it bothers me that he's bothering other women, but especially young girls who might be too scared to scream. It's been a few months and the police have never contacted me on if they caught him. He never actually touched me, so I guess it wasn't serious enough for them. It made me permanently anxious on my commute, and I never sit alone or take my jacket off anymore. I'm never really comfortable on the train. Scary man with the heart and box scarred on his face. Let's not meet again. I met this kid in middle school. He was pretty sweet. A generally nice but weird kid. That's fine. Everybody's a bit weird in their own ways. He was a Boy Scout and he knew some weird facts. I gave him the usernames on my YouTube channel, Kick, Snapchat, and some other accounts that I can't remember. He added, followed me on all of those accounts. He tried to flirt and convince me to leave my boyfriend because he was better than him and that he loved me more. I stuck to being his friend all throughout middle school despite our differences. He was also mentally unstable. I didn't think we were going to have classes in high school together. We had one, honors biology. During that class, he continued to flirt with me on the low key and tried to get me to go to his house so he could tutor me as I complained about my grades. I didn't do the work, but I didn't need the tutoring. I just needed to do my work. He was also kinda creepy, and I was counting down the days until sophomore year started. He had even purchased Overwatch for me and told me to play Mercy so that we could be the ultimate support duo and wreck our foes together. I played on PC with him once or twice, but I got sick of it because the computer I played on was shit. We had classes up until I learned he was going to move to a different school. Perfect. Now I wouldn't have to see him again. He signed my yearbook and told me he was going to Brazil. Perfect. Then out of the blue, when summer vacation had just started, he wanted to see me one last time before I would go on to be color guard for another year and have no summer. Plus, with him going to Brazil to visit family, I said, what the hell, why not? We decided to meet up by an abandoned park close to our houses and chat for a bit. I asked my mom, she said sure. She dropped me off for a bit with some money so we could hang out. We head over to the spot we agreed to meet at, and I only have to wait a minute or so before he rides up on his bike. My mom and I get out of the car so she can meet him. So you're the Stalker guy that my daughter wanted to meet up with? Yes, ma'am. That's me. Mom, come on. I just wanted to hang out for a bit, like I said. Ah, okay. So what time do you want me to pick her up? 4? 5? Mom, stop. You're embarrassing me. I will call you when I'm ready. Hey, actually, I think I gotta get back home to pack. Nice meeting you, Mrs. Yeah, okay, bye. And like that, he rode away on his bike, fast, my mom and I watching him go. We got into the car, silently, and began to drive home, not a word spoken between us. Once we got home, she grabbed my arm before I went inside and held me by my shoulder. You said you knew that kid, right? From where? Jesus fucking Christ, Mom, I know him from school. Why? Is there something wrong? Mom stared a hole through me for a few seconds, and then she said, Don't tell your father this, but did you notice how he kept fidgeting and stuttering? Yeah, he was probably fucking nervous. His shirt had a snake on it, and snakes were known in the Bible for what? Who took on the form of a snake? Oh God, Mom. Yeah, your religion. Satan, and what about it? What did Satan do? Oh God, kill people. He's probably going to try to stab you. What? What? Really? You think that because he has a fucking snake on his shirt that he's gonna try to stab me because the Bible says that Satan was a snake? What the fuck is wrong with you? He was fidgeting because he had a weapon. Lord told me not to leave you alone because he had evil intentions. He told you to go to a nearly abandoned park to hang out right by a freeway. He was going to try and murder you and dump your body on the side of the road. Yeah. Okay, Mom, sure. You said he was going to Brazil, right? And moving schools. Cut off contact with him. Never talk to him again. He'll try to harm you or anyone else in our family if he gets the chance. After listening to this stupid bitch, we went outside. I blocked him on every single platform I could have imagined. Somehow, as stupid as my mom is, it all made sense. He was a Boy Scout, making him knowledgeable about all sorts of things. He browsed the internet and loved crime stories, thus giving him all sorts of ideas. He knew and discussed with me multiple times on how to dispose of a body. I was ignorant and stupid. I distanced myself from him but he messaged me and gave me an ultimatum while in Brazil. Break up with your boyfriend, or I'll throw myself off of a cliff and end my life. I added him and my boyfriend to a group chat and tried to calm him down. He did, for a short while, until it started up again. We decided, fuck it. We blocked his account and thought that was the end of it. He made multiple other accounts and spammed us. We made new Kick accounts with very different usernames and moved on. He followed me on my new Instagram after I posted about it on my old one. He added me on my new Snapchat that I had made sophomore year. I wanted it to be over, so I tried to find the accounts and block them, with no success. He blended right in and was likely catfishing me without me realizing. I became more and more paranoid. I grew scared. I couldn't look or hear a name similar to his without nearly having a mental breakdown. I did not want to trust anyone, and soon after it began to break me down. I took an interest in knives, and once I turned 18, just a couple of months ago, I bought my first one. I feel so much safer with it, and bought an additional 3 along with a beautiful katana because of the fears of being attacked. They are my beautiful children, all good girls and boys. About 2 weeks ago, my boyfriend flew out from the opposite side of the US to come to my prom. We got fancied up, looked nice, and headed out. We got to the venue, and we were waiting for 2 of my friends and one of their boyfriends. When I see him, I paused for a moment before realizing that I'm with my boyfriend in a public space with camera and security guards all around me. One small move and I'll scream. We make eye contact, but he was more focused on his date, a fellow ex-guard member. My old friend and I chat for a bit, then I ignore him. So, to my stalker who wanted to stab me to death, let's not meet again, and please, don't stab me if you find me.
I was out on a camping trip with my friends last summer. We'd gone to the mountains in West Virginia. It was something that you'd think was in some kind of coffee table picture book. There were large snow-covered trees that seemed to glisten in the sunlight, and there was not a single large building for miles. Only small log cabins that belonged to some of the locals. You could actually see every animal that crossed your path and not have to position yourself in some kind of weird way just to get a good look at them. We'd gone up there to do some hunting, fishing, and I wanted to try skiing for the first time. The other guy, Scott, that came with us, I didn't really like him. He was a loudmouth, pretentious, grouchy alcoholic. I did not really want to bring him with us, but he was David's friend, and I did not want to cause problems. Scott usually spent his time with a cooler full of his favorite beer beside him, complaining about every little thing that was going on in his life. Since meeting him, I never once heard him place the blame for things going wrong where it should have been. I had said before that I didn't really like Scott, and the way he was acting during this camping trip just gave me more of a reason to not like him at all. The entire time we were in the mountains, Scott was wasted and reeked of cheap beer. I don't understand how one person could ingest that much alcohol and not die from it. The way he looked at a case of beer was like how I looked at a brand new computer or food. I was honestly just waiting for this trip to end so that I could never have to see that moron ever again. We'd all gone to bed around midnight, and sometime around 2:30 in the morning, we were blinded by a giant bright light. We ran out of our car, and David desperately tried to get the engine to turn over, but it just would not turn over. Suddenly, these tall beings with large black eyes were standing outside of the car. We were panicking, and I literally pissed on myself. Scott pulls out his .22 250 hunting rifle and begins loading it. He points the gun at the window and blows out the back passenger window, killing one of the beings. The other four Bings reach into the other side of the car and drag Scott out by his throat, slamming him on the ground. The other Bing goes back around the driver's side and smashes the driver's window and tries to grab David. David gets the car started and we drive off, leaving Scott behind. I look out the back window as we are driving off and Scott is being lifted up by the light. 2 weeks later, Scott was found lying naked in a rural farm area. The police take him and he's trying to explain to them what had happened that night. According to Scott, 2 guys in black suits came up to him and told him to keep his mouth shut or else he would regret it. Scott began using heavy drugs instead of drinking and now suffers from severe PTSD after the event. No one believes any of us when we tell the story. We know what we saw that night up there in the mountains. I have never been back to the mountains since then, nor have I been camping. I am just too afraid of what might be lurking up there for its next unsuspecting victim. I grew up in a town in a relatively rural area part of England. Once upon a time, the whole area had been ancient woodland, but by the time I grew up, their urban sprawl meant that only a few small pockets of woodland remained entirely surrounded by housing estates. The quickest way to get anywhere from the street I grew up on was to take a footpath that ran from one end of the street around the back of the houses and then through maybe a quarter of a mile wide patch of woodland before you reached the heart of town. It only took a few minutes if you took the most direct path through, but my heart would be racing the whole time. I had to walk through there to get to school or to the shops when my mom sent me to go get groceries, and knowing that my older brothers would tell me that the woods were haunted by ghosts of people who had been hung at the gallows that once stood there. When I was a teenager, I became scared of the woods for a different reason. During the winter months, when it was already dark, when I walked home from school, other kids would sometimes lurk amongst the trees to scare the shit out of the smaller kids, demand what little money they had, or sometimes even their mobile phones. But I'm an adult now, so when I visited my mom in my hometown last winter, the woods no longer held any fear for me. It had snowed probably for the first time in a few years, and my mom, in typical mom fashion, immediately informed her elderly neighbor that her daughter was visiting and would happily take her dog for a walk so that she did not have to risk the icy pavements. The morning after I arrived back there, I found myself walking down the footpath in the woods with a fat, gray around the muzzle, old Labrador in tow. It doesn't often snow in the city I live in. Now I decided to take a recent purchase, a good DSLR camera, out with me to photograph the scenery, the fat old dog, and I wandered around the woods for 20 minutes or so, the dog hobbling a bit in the snow and occasionally making a half-hearted attempt to chase wood pigeons while I snapped photographs of snow-laden branches in the stark black and white landscape. It was quiet early on a Sunday morning, so nobody else was around, and there was very few other footprints in the snow. I was quite enjoying the walk, but I had started to get a bit cold and did not want to exhaust the neighbor's dog too much, so I was just about to head back when I heard something moving quickly through the woods towards us. Someone was heading rapidly down the main path. The dog and I were currently out of view of a path, but only for a few more seconds. I don't really know why it occurred to me to hide, but I did without really thinking about it. I hesitated for a moment and then, mindful of memories of being accosted by hooded teenagers and robbed of my very first brick-like phone, I stepped off of the path and hid among the bushes and trees. The lens of my camera at the time was worth about the same as a month's rent, and I guess I was worried that some opportunistic robber would see it and decide that I was an easy target. The dog hesitated for a moment as I tugged at his lead, but followed into the bushes just in time. I crouched down with a hand on his head, willing him to be still and quiet. As a person came into view of the path just a few feet away, I didn't really get a good look at them, but I saw that it was a man, tall and wearing a dark jacket and red baseball cap, and moving in a hurry. Thankfully, the dog remained quiet, and then the man was gone. When the man was well out of sight, the dog and I stepped back onto the path and decided to take a few more pictures before we left. When we were finally heading home, the near silence of the woods was broken by the loud drone of a helicopter overhead. I could not see it clearly until we were on the footpath behind the houses and out from the trees, but once there I could see that it was a police helicopter and it was circling over the woods. I returned the fat old dog to my mom's neighbor without any incident and completely forgot about the helicopter until a little later when my mom switched the radio on in her kitchen so that we could listen to some music while we ate lunch. It was a local radio station, and their top news story was that they were hunting a man who had beaten someone nearly to death on a secluded footpath earlier that morning. The path they described linked the woods that I had been walking in to the center of town. The suspect was described as tall, wearing a dark jacket and a red hat. I saw him fleeing the scene of the crime, and it was only my paranoia about my new camera that prevented me from meeting him in the middle of the woods early in the morning with nobody else around. I don't know what would have happened if I would have stayed on the path, but I'm glad I never found out. His victim on the other footpath survived, but it was a close thing. This happened in 1971 or 1972 when my mother was about 14 or 15 years old. The incident occurred in a heavily wooded area near by Montevallo, Alabama, close to Birmingham. My mother is the oldest of 5 children. She has 3 sisters and a brother who is the baby of the family. One weekend in the cool months of the fall, my grandfather decided to take the whole family, my grandmother, my mother, and all of my aunts and uncles, so 7 people total, into the woods for target practice with a rifle. My mother grew up quite poor, and they didn't always live in the best neighborhoods, so my grandfather wanted to teach the kids how to defend themselves with a rifle if need be. Like I said, it was later in the fall, so the trees were bare and there were lots of leaves on the ground. The wooded area was just off a dirt road, so there was a fairly rural area they were in. Since it was so far off the beaten path, my grandfather became startled when he heard the roar of a car engine so deep in the woods. My mom remembers the car as being a blue Ford Galaxy. Despite the fact that my grandfather had a gun, he totally freaked out and told my grandma and the kids to hide under a pile of leaves in the woods. The man in the driver's seat got out, dragged a woman's body out of the car, and just dumped her there in the woods and drove away. After my grandfather was sure that the man had gone, everyone came out of hiding, and the woman sat up and stared them straight in the face. My grandfather asked the woman if she needed help. She said no, she would be fine. She didn't seem to be injured and obviously didn't want help. She hadn't put up a fight with the man when he was dragging her out of the car. So my grandfather cut the shooting lesson short and decided to rush the kids home to safety. While on the trail back to the dirt road where my grandfather had parked their car, they passed the man in the blue Ford Galaxy driving out of the woods. My mom looked over and noticed that he had a huge machete laying across the front seats right beside him. My grandfather made sure that the man could see that he was carrying a rifle, but everyone was careful not to give away what they had just seen. The man struck up a small talk with my grandfather, asked him how he was doing and what they were doing out in the woods. My grandfather explained that he had just taken his family out for target practice with the rifle. The man told him to have a nice day and continued driving. The next day my grandfather went back out to the spot in the woods. There was not a body there. However, he did find the woman's wig, her purse, some Kleenex, and a pair of eyeglasses. He collected the items and took them home. According to my grandfather, the area of the woods was known for having shallow graves and being a dumping site for bodies. My mother became hysterical when he walked in the door carrying that stuff. She started screaming, "He killed that lady, he killed that lady." My grandfather ended up taking the items to the police station, but my mom doesn't think anything ever came of it. She never heard anything else about it after that. Well, she did hear one thing about it. I guess earlier the next morning my grandmother called my mom. When she arrived at work, just before the kids left for school, she told them not to take the bus that day, that she would come and pick them up and drive them to school. When my mom asked why, my grandmother said, because the car is waiting for you at the bus stop.
Before I became an SGA, the guy who had the position before me almost fought a customer. So the story goes, it was a dark Thursday night, almost around 8 p.m. We have an older white couple enter the store and proceed to start looking around. Roughly 10 minutes later, two black guys walk in. They basically personify everything that you would consider ghetto. It's like they walked out of a 2 Chainz music video. Anyway, one of them repeatedly keeps saying a racial slur. So the SGA, Bob, politely asks to watch his language. The guy completely disregards him and says it again. So Bob says to him, "Listen guys, I understand that's a word that you are comfortable using and hearing, but there are other customers in the store that aren't. Can you please stop?" The guys say, "Whatever, man, it's just a word," Bob says. "Regardless, you can't say it in here." The guy says it again, so Bob has had enough and asks them to leave. The guy obviously doesn't want to go and starts making a scene. He's a little guy, probably around 5'7", maybe 140 pounds. He goes up to Bob and gets in his face. "I'll knock you the fuck out right here, old ass motherfucker." Mind you, this entire time Bob had been leaning over the counter. Bob stands up, walks around the counter, and the guy soon realizes that Bob is 6'3", 250 pounds. His buddy that was there is already walking towards the door, and it's not until the ding from the door goes off that the guy realizes he's on his own and bolts. It was crazy as hell. I'll probably never forget that day. This happened 8 years ago. The company was in a completely different place. If you think hours are bad now, back then it was a weekday. You were lucky to have a closer. Most of the time, you only had 3 people that ran the store: manager, ASM, and third key, SGA. Was a weekday night, was closing by myself like normal, done most of the work for the day, and was taking a little break and organizing things behind the counter for the next day. I was by myself like normal, nothing was amiss. Guy comes in, nice shirt, good pants and shoes, and was asking about a PSP. We decide on what games he wants. I remember I needed his memory card. I turn around to get it. When I turned back, he had pulled a gun. At first I didn't process it. I was in shock. Then my instincts kicked in, and I realized what was happening. He said, "Put the PSP on the counter and back up." I just kinda stared at him for a minute. I didn't know how to react. He said it again, and my brain turned on. I put the PSP on the counter with the games and the memory card. He snatched it with his other hand and bolted. Kid went to jail for armed robbery of a gas station 2 days later. They found the PSP in his car, and I had to testify against him. Oh, and the gun he had was fake. He had it on him when he robbed the gas station. This isn't particularly crazy, but it did happen just yesterday. I got a call from a mother who sounded panicked and was describing her 12-year-old son to me. I thought for sure she was going to tell me he ran away and to call if he showed up. She proceeded to tell me that he was coming to the store to sell his DSi that had been taken away from him for poor behavior. She told me I couldn't take it for trade and I was okay to comply considering the situation and that the child was only 12. She then told me I needed to take the system away from him and send him away and she would come pick it up. I was not okay with that. I thought about taking it in on a trade and then voiding it out of if and when she came to pick it up. The kid finally shows up and is interrupting me while I am helping another customer. His mother shows up before I am able to take the DSI away. I thought for sure she was going to yell at him and drag him out. But she is acting like she is giving permission to trade in the system. I'm so confused. I finally wrap up with the other customers and go over to the other register to figure out the situation. We talk about trade-in value and everything seems normal. She asked if she can meet at the side of the counter to talk and writes on a piece of paper, "I need you to take the system away from him and hand it to me." What the fuck? I didn't realize. What the fuck? I didn't really feel comfortable with this at all, especially considering this kid could go batshit crazy from his already questionable behavior in the store. I took the system from him and acted like I was inspecting it for a trade. I asked them when they bought it, and she said only 2 weeks ago. I told them if they didn't want the system, the best thing for them to do is to go home and get the receipt. I handed the device to the mother and she agrees to go get the receipt. They walk out of the store as the kid continues to get louder and louder. "Mom, can we do that? Mom, can we return it? Can we do that? Mom, Mom!" And I am left to feel completely weird and uncomfortable about that parent involving me like that. I once had an Indian family come into my store. They brought in a receipt and 2 games and said the games did not work and they wanted their money back. The receipt was about 3 months old. I explained that I could not return them because it was past the warranty and they had not purchased the year-long warranty. I explained they could trade their games in defective and pay the difference if they wanted a new copy of it. The husband nodded, so I went, grabbed the 2 games, came back, scanned them in and traded his in as defective. I then informed him and his family that they owed like $24 or something. The dad looked outraged. I explained to him the whole situation to him again. I guess he didn't want to because he took his 2 games, opened them and literally snapped the discs in half and then stormed off, leaving his mess behind. I still don't understand the thought process behind it. A guy came in trying to buy prepaid MasterCard's Visa with 2 gift cards that obviously had been from a massive amount of stolen games. He had been at another location the day before to do a huge trade of almost 100 brand new games that had all been sealed and unopened, plus a couple of games hadn't even been released yet. I think someone he knew robbed a shipment and they traded everything in for money to spend on prepaids. Sketchy shit. Also, being a female at EB, I'm in Canada, results in some interesting stories. A furry once made me climb up the counter to grab an Xbox so he could growl at my butt while wearing his tail. There was also foot fetish guy who would come in to pretend to play MLB on the PS3 and stare at my feet. Once he asked if I could take off my shoes. I was working alone on a very slow Saturday morning. Enter super drunk middle-aged guy. He seemed that he had been drinking since last night without getting any sleep in between. He came in screaming and waving his liquor bottle He was so drunk I couldn't understand what he was screaming about. It seemed he was just angry with me for some reason. I was fucking terrified. I was so sure he was going to hit me with that bottle, so I hit the panic button that calls any nearby guard. By the time the guard came, the drunk guy had already left, screaming and cursing for no reason. Another one was when I was working on a very busy day. A dad and a son came in to get some pre-owned games. Suddenly, without warning, the kid puked all over the floor in front of our desk. Dad asks for some paper, and I brought him a whole roll of it, thinking he'd cleaned the floor. Nope, he just cleaned his son's mouth and left without a word. The whole store smelled like puke, and I had to clean it up myself. I quit a while ago, but my two co-workers were working at the time. The guy was one of the sweetest people you'll ever meet. He had the kindest personality and always had a smile on his face. A suspicious guy was loitering around the store, left the store to grab a club from outside, came back in and hit my co-worker over the head 3 times, took a bunch of iPods and iPads, and ran outside the door. My poor friend suffered a concussion and needed stitches. It looked absolutely awful. One of them, when I was still a GA and was closing with my SGA at the time, it was about 6 in the afternoon, and just for sake of the story, we work in a close to ghetto area. We will just say we get a mixed group of customers anyway. So the day goes on, customers are browsing in the store at all corners. Next thing we know, these kids bolt in the store, straight to the PS3 section. Before we could say anything to them, the mom comes in, a pretty big lady comes in, stumbles up to my counter, straight to me, and before I could say a word, she blurts out, "You got a stool?" I'm sitting there trying to keep the straightest face I could, with still showing a little smirk, and said, "I'm sorry, no we don't." So she sighs and continues to shop. She finally comes back to the register. We ring her up and she leaves. The moment that she steps out of the door, everyone in the store looks at one another for a second and burst out laughing. It was the funniest shit in the world. We were in tears along with half of our customers. Funniest day of my entire GameStop career. The weirdest day has to be the day that I opened alone. Typical day until a certain guy came in. I deal with a lot of kids asking about JRPGs, which I'm not familiar too much with, so I bullshit the dude. And he takes it as we are friends, I guess. So he chills at the end of my counter while I help customers really quiet. When we slow down, he shows me a drawing he literally just did and says, "You have really nice features, so I drew you for my fan fiction." I'm sitting here like, what the fuck? But I just kept my composure. He ended up leaving, and I had the most creeped out feeling of my entire life. Crazy shit happens in the city, man. Well, short of being robbed earlier this year just before close, my craziest story happened about a week or 2 after I got promoted to SGA. I was working one of my very first shifts as closing manager on duty. It was the last hour before close. Really haggard-looking older black man came in. I attempted my usual greet. I said hello as I saw him enter, and then I stepped out from behind the counter to approach and offer help. He calmly but threateningly told me to back off, so I did, but I offered to answer any questions or address any concerns if he needed anything. Shortly after, 2 kids that were related to him somehow came in, and his demeanor totally changed for the positive with them. After a while of letting them browse, the man asked me to come help him find a title on Wii for him. He sort of explains the type of game he wants, something similar to Wii Sports that offers a variety of activities. After a few suggestions, he notices the Wii U section right next to the Wii section in our store and asks why I didn't recommend anything from that wall since I didn't know. I asked him if he had a Wii U, and he got really bitter and mean again and said, "Of course I do! Do you think I'm poor or something?" From there, it just evolved into him accusing me of racism in a loud, half yell for like 15 minutes straight. Somehow I managed to keep my calm and continue being courteous and helping him. Instead of turning my back and running away, eventually the guy gets really sullen and starts apologizing profusely to me. He never specified any exact offense about his past, but he kept alluding to having poor experiences. By the time he left, he had shaken my hand twice and expressed gratitude for the help I offered, even though he and his kids didn't buy anything. When it was all over, my GA was just staring wide-eyed at me and told me he was afraid I was going to get stabbed and that he was ready to intervene if things escalated physically. That's also the most restraint I've ever shown in my entire life, but I guess it worked out. It didn't happen on my shift, but the next day I was listening to the story. So the story goes that a customer comes in to check the PS3 section. The store manager and the SGA are on that night and work on getting the value tower and other things. Night gets busy and the guy is still checking out the games. The occasional or from his corner of solitude. The SGA goes up to him and asks him what has brought him in today. He gives the old, just looking around response. So after the customers clear out, the guy eventually settles on a game and promptly leaves, rushing out without grabbing his receipt. Happens. So they continue working on the promotionals. The manager goes to check a game from the PS3 section, and there it was, staring at the man. It, in all of its full framed glory, shined more than a black eye, the most massive turd ever fathomed. This putrid thing radiated. Its aroma was dizzying to the mind. Only the vehement of warriors could even hope to withstand this pungent odor. That is the craziest thing that I had ever seen. One guy tried to trade in a PS3 that had bugs crawling out of it and smelled terrible. He just left it. From what I heard, someone cleaned it up and discovered it still had the PRP warranty attached to it, and defective exchanged it for another system. A lady came into the store and started accusing me of taking advantage of her son because he traded in some games. My SM at the time stepped in and took the brunt of it. Apparently the lady's son traded in his Wii stuff without the console to my SM, and she explained he wouldn't be able to use his Wii anymore. His dad came in later, or the next day, when they realized the system was useless and screamed at my SM, and she didn't reverse it. Then I come in, and his mom gets on my case. I had no idea what she was talking about. There were other customers in there too. The lady was talking about us being a community and not taking advantage of the children to my SM. She ended up reversing it all. This lady seriously thought she was in the right, and I'm thinking, fuck you, lady. What kind of an example do you think you guys are setting, coming in here yelling until you get what you want? Another time, with the same SM, a group of kids came in and started browsing. One had a weird afro wig on, so it was strange, but whatever. My SM was talking to some lady trying to figure out if there was some program to get video games to kids with cancer. Then, out of nowhere, the kid in the wig starts screaming like a fucking Dragon Ball Z character. I didn't realize it at first. I thought he was having a seizure or something. The lady talking to my SM bolted like she thought she was about to get killed. Then I see one of the kids videotaping it. The screaming kid leaves, and one of the other kids said something like, "That's what happens when your parents do drugs," as they left. I look at my SM, and she's just as confused as me. The customer came back like 5 minutes later and was like, "I wanted to make sure you guys were okay." But the craziest thing has nothing to do with customers being crazy. I've had 5 DMs, and the last one hired this dude off the street as an SGA, and he apparently is immune to being fired. He has had corporate called on him a few times and used to piss off customers on a regular basis. If you're new, go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe to my channel, as it really helps me out. And if you are already subscribed, welcome back and thank you for subscribing.